to our Week 2 e-lesson on writing learning goals. So the module objectives for this e-lesson are create learning goals for the individual learning project, and then describe the various types of instructional technology tools available to students and teachers. This will be particularly important as you move forward redoing your blog posts, screencast, and then also help guides. So the first thing, this week we dealt with instructional technology. So what is it, and kind of what's a workable definition? So the video you were supposed to watch was only about 2.5 minutes or so, very, very short, but there was a lot of information in that 2.5 minutes. So for instructional technology, we're talking about design. That's the first thing, design of technology for educational use. Not the development of it, but just the overall idea of how technology should be used within education. And then we have development, so making things that actually tie in with education and technology. That's what we'll be doing with our screencast, help guides, and blog posts. We'll be looking at the development of instructional technology. And then utilization, so how do we use the tools that are available to us? That's another thing that we'll focus on whenever we look at our blog post and our screencast and help guides, because we'll look at the utilization. How are we using what we currently have to the best of our ability? The management of resources. So how can we better manage resources that we already have to make a more impact on education? That's one of those things that's also a very important aspect of instructional technology, but a lot of times overlooked. And then evaluation. Do we actually look at what we have and then evaluate its effectiveness, or do we just keep doing the same things over and over again because we're comfortable doing it? One thing that we're going to explore is new ways to do what we're already doing within the class. Because the good thing is you're already used to doing things within the class with your teachers, so how can we better do those things within class? I think that'll be a very helpful thing for you as a help desk worker, because then you'll be able to share with teachers from a student perspective what would be the best way to do this assignment, or how could we better use what we have. And that's all a part of that evaluation phase. Now the purpose of it. The purpose of instructional technology, for one, is to increase engagement. So make things that people actually want to do. Take tasks that would normally be extremely boring to do and add in some elements that actually do make it interesting. Increase efficiency. So one of the things in the classroom, especially that's really hard, is this whole idea of efficiently grading assignments, turning in assignments, doing things digitally, so increasing that efficiency. Digital organization. If you've ever had a class where things seem disorganized on paper, and then people try to do classroom things that are online and then it seems disorganized, it can really affect how people view educational technology or technology in the classroom. So this whole idea of digital organization ties directly into instructional technology. And then we have digital learning. Digital learning is different than traditional face-to-face learning or pencil paper learning. It has to be structured differently, and I think you can understand that because anytime you've done something digitally, it's just a different world than when you have paper, pencil, or you have a book. Now, the types of things that we'll be exploring, we've got screencasting, which you'll have experience doing by the end of the course. Podcasting, which we won't focus on podcasting, but take screencasting and just take away the screen recording and done, it's a podcast. We have interactives, which would be things that I guess you would click and actions would happen. You could sort of think of it like a game, like a video game is an interactive, but it doesn't necessarily have to have game components. It's just got to have a reaction when a student does a certain action. Mobile learning, so using your mobile device, phone or tablet to actually access materials. E-learning, so anything that is actually online is considered e-learning. What you're doing now is e-learning. Online collaboration, so we already do quite a bit of that, but we don't necessarily collaborate all the time. So using like a Google Doc to collaborate in class with your peers when you're working on an assignment. And then an LMS. An LMS is Canvas, what you're in right now to access materials. That's the management side of learning. Let's move on to copyright and fair use. I know I'm moving kind of fast through this, but I want to keep this as short as possible. So one thing you'll have to pay attention to is copyright and fair use through this course. You will not be able to go through this course and reuse somebody else's work unless it falls into a few categories. For one, copyright means you can't borrow or steal others' work. You can't just call it your own, or you can't take it and give them credit unless you have permission to take that. So understand that. Just because you give somebody credit for their work doesn't mean you can borrow it. If it's copyrighted, it's still copyrighted regardless of whether you give them credit. You can use work if it's properly licensed. So that means if you have permission from the copyright holder, you can use it. If it's part of Creative Commons and you follow the license agreement, then you can use it, or if it's in the public domain. We'll go through those three things in just a minute. And then finally, always follow the license agreements. So if you make an agreement with the copyright holder that you can use this for class and you're not going to make money off of it and you're going to give them credit, then you can use it. But if they say, well, you can use it in class and you can't make money on it, but then you put it on a personal site and you're making money, you're not following that agreement. Or if it's part of Creative Commons and you don't give credit to the actual creator, but that license says you have to, that's also a violation. Always follow those license agreements. Now, there are three types of licenses whenever we start looking at these things. The first one is a traditional copyright. That means you have to get specific permission from the copyright holder before you can use that. You can't just give them credit and use it or something like that. You have to get express permission. This one's extremely hard to get because a lot of times you've had to contact the copyright holder directly, and they can always refuse your ability to use it. Disney is the worst with this. You cannot use any of Disney's characters or anything in it unless you get express permission, and that's most of the time not given, even for educational purposes. They don't give that. Then we have Creative Commons. This is something that an author has published and put out there for other people to use with a few agreements in place. Most of the time you have to give them credit for the work that they've done. Sometimes that's not the case, but for Creative Commons, it normally tells you what you have to do in order to use that. So just pay attention to that license agreement. You're free to use it, but there are conditions. And then we have public domains. Whenever we have public domain, you're free to use it. You don't have to give permission. You don't have to get permission or give credit or anything. A lot of times, public domain things are things that somebody has specifically put in there that anybody can use regardless of who gets credit for it, or things that are extremely older pieces of work that don't fall under copyright anymore. So they may have been copyrighted at one time, but because the creator is long dead and there is nobody that claims that copyright, then normally it goes into public domain. With that said, you have to be careful because it might say that it's public domain, but you need to do a little bit of research first. Now we come to fair use. Whenever we look at fair use, those are things that hold traditional copyright licenses, but they're things that we can use if we follow a few things. For one, most of the work has to be our own. There is no guideline of how much has to be our own before it's considered most, but consider that you pretty much have to be able to tell that all of it's your own work, save for maybe one or two items. It's a gray area to be careful when you use things whenever you say, well, most of the work is my own. You have to give credit to the creator or author if you're going to use a copyrighted piece of work. And then you can receive no money for this. So no money can be exchanged if you use something for fair use. I would assume that most things that you would use don't fall under fair use. So be careful because you can get in big trouble saying, well, it was under fair use, did I use that? But at the end of the day, is most of the work your own? Well, I think that can be debatable. So the next thing I'm going to show you is actually how to do an advanced Google search. It'll be really fast, but that'll help you stay out of this whole murky area whenever you're looking for images or things like that for your products. I want to go through this whole idea of an advanced search in Google so that we can really follow copyright and make sure that we're not violating any laws when it comes to copyright. So I've done a Google search on cars, and most of you know this. If you want to find images, which is where I normally go to find anything, I'll click on images. The only problem is most of these images are copyrighted. We can't just copy and paste these in. So we need to go to settings, and we're going to do an advanced search. Now if you scroll down, you'll see usage rights. We need to filter this by usage rights. So I'm going to click on that, and what you need to do is you can use free to use or share. If you are doing this for money, you need to make sure you click that next one down, free to use or share even commercially. So for the course, whenever I use images in the course, I normally select free to use or share even commercially because I am creating a course for the school system. It's not one of those things that I'm not getting paid to create a course. So I always use the free to use or share even commercially. But for you, since you're not getting paid for it, you can do the second one down, free to use or share, and then do the advanced search. And it will give you all of the things that you're free to use or share within your projects. So it's one of those things that it takes out all of the things that you can't use. Now, you got to be careful because if you click on an image, you might see that there is a Creative Commons license for it. Most of these things, it won't necessarily fall into that because you'll see it from Pixabay or Wikipedia or something like that. You also have to be careful because if you click on it and it looks really fuzzy, then you probably don't want to use it because it's a low resolution. Pixabay is the worst when it comes to resolutions because for some reason their things are not very high quality. If you have questions throughout the process, let me know, but please use that advanced search to filter by license because it'll be important for following copyright. Now that we've gone through a few of the housekeeping things like copyright and then instructional technology, let's go through learning goals. And for learning goals, the first thing you have to make sure is that it's specific. So your goal has to have a specific thing in mind, and then it has to be measurable. So you have to be able to measure that specific trait. It has to be achievable, so something you can actually get to, something that you can do in the given time. Relevant, so it's got to be something that you would see as important. Don't pick a goal that you don't see as important or that's relevant to you. And then time bound, so you have to have a specific time you're going to accomplish that. That way you know exactly when you're going to get to that point. Now I'm going to go through the guide that will help you through this. I'm going to go through it real quick because I think you'll be able to understand and follow it pretty clearly. But just pay attention through this because it will help you whenever you start doing the assignment. I want to quickly go through this whole learning goals process and the guide that goes along with it. So when you open it up, you'll see 4 steps in the beginning that walk you through these things. So what do I want to learn? How will I know that I learned it? How long will it take? And what resources do I need? So there's nothing you have to fill out in this top part. It's simply explaining these steps. But please read through those because it will help you whenever you start creating your learning goal. Because the next thing you need to do is fill in this table down here, which, by the way, go through those 4 steps. So what do I want to learn? Make sure to type in your answer there. How will I know I learned it? Type it in there. Now think of these things like this. Whenever you put these together, we're going to be combining all of these into a sentence or a statement that will form your learning goal. You might have more than one objective you want to accomplish during this ILP process, and that's okay. But for each learning goal, make sure you follow through this process. And you may need to ask me questions because I know this is probably the first time you've ever written something like this, and it can seem a little tricky in the beginning. So make sure you fill in that table. And then down here, part 2, it goes through 2 examples of what a learning goal is. But then here, you will write your actual learning goal. So you'll take what's up here in the table, and you'll put it together. So if you read through the examples, I think it'll make sense because like example 1, I will be able to explain the top 5 current trends in instructional technology by creating a multimedia presentation by June 5th. Well, what do I want to learn? The current trends in instructional technology. And then how will I know I learned it? Well, because I'm going to be creating a multimedia presentation. When will it be due? June 5th. So all of these things are actually up here. Now, the what resources do I need? That's so that you can plan your actual learning process. And then how much do I already know will also help you in that whole learning process when you look at things. These top three, though, you'll use specifically for this statement. And then the last part, part 3, this will help you with your checkups whenever we go through. I want you to go through and start mapping out this process. Now, this is a guide, so that means it can change throughout the course. But come up with some deliverables that you can have on these specific weeks. Now, it goes all the way up to week 18. We'll have these ILP checkups, and we'll be looking at the deliverables and proof of progress whenever you start doing those checkups. Now, for an example of a proof of progress, maybe you want to have a review of one article by the time the second week is up. For this week, your deliverable and proof of progress is your learning objective. So by the end of week 2, yeah, you need to have your learning objective done. If not, we can bleed that over into week 3. You will lose points on the assignment, but at the same time, we need to get this right because the whole project really hangs on whether you can have a learning objective or not. If you have any questions throughout the process, please don't hesitate to ask. I know this might seem a little bit overwhelming at first, but we'll get through it, and I think that it'll be a beneficial process for the future. To the what next, we need a complete discussion 2, complete the learning goals assignment, you need to turn in your very first work log, and then complete the reflection. If you have any questions throughout this week and throughout these assignments, I know it kind of seems like a lot for this week, but please reach out to me and let me know if you need help.